Welcome to this short presentation of 2 episodes of the cartoon series Rick and Morty. I've entitled it Cartooning America into Transhumanism. Transhumanism being the future state that technology is going to bring us according to people such as Yuval Harari, but also Julian Huxley and Aldous Huxley. The episodes I asked you to watch focus primarily on digitally generated environments, but as I hope to convince you by the end, that will all be part of it. Originally, Rick and Morty was based upon a short parody film of the Back to the Future film franchise, with Doc Brown as Rick Sanchez and Marty McFly as Morty Smith. Roiland was busy churning out TV series ideas, and Harmon played as a voice actor for Disney. When season 1 debuted, they immediately ruled their time slot and signed a contract to extend over 70 episodes. They have won 2 Emmy Awards for Outstanding Animated Program, and for 2 years in a row that I have checked, they have had a Rotten Tomatoes rating of 94% positive. I expect many of you are familiar with the Rick and Morty TV show, but I would like to bring it into some of the parameters that we use in literature, film, and television studies. The show is constructed so that each episode is a short hero narrative with what is called the Hollywood contract. Generally, clear evil and good characters, generally a conflict between those two, and an obligatory chase scene. But one could say that the moral clarity that one usually gets in a film such as Harry Potter isn't quite as clearly rendered in Rick and Morty. One can say that the series combines the Simpsons with Futurama, because there is in each episode a domestic situation, comedy situation, something about the family, and there's also some science fiction craziness that is going on. One can say flavors of Hitchhiker's Guide and Doctor Who. As a matter of fact, at one point, Rick Sanchez even identifies himself as Doctor Who. The plots are usually doubled: one science fiction adventure and one domestic subplot, something that happens with the family. We have Rick Sanchez, a mad scientist with an anarchist and nihilistic streak. We have his grandson, Morty, a typical 14-year-old adolescent, and we see the series primarily through his set of values because he is brought along, and obviously he doesn't know as much as his grandfather does. And we also have Summer, Morty's sister. Maybe a nod in the direction of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, since the creators of the show are very, very fond of horror films, as I'll mention in a moment. We have Beth, Morty's mom and Rick's daughter, and we have Jerry, the sort of sad sack character in the show. I'm going to just remind you briefly about this element of the encoded uncanny that I've used a couple of times before, but I would ask you to draw your attention to this area right here, in that both of the episodes I asked you to watch play strongly on the digital environment element here. The ABCs of Beth has some elements of cloning and cyborg, man-machine mixture, cyborg technology depiction. M. Night Shyamalan's was first broadcast 13th of January 2014, and it is a play upon the filmmaker M. Night Shyamalan who specializes in supernatural plots and surprising endings. And actually, both of the episodes I asked you to watch do involve horror films and horror filmmakers in them. Uh, Basically, Rick and Jerry are nested inside a triple VR virtual reality simulation, a simulation within a simulation within a simulation. Um, and even the character Morty turns out to be a simulated Morty, except at the very postscript of the episode. Um, Rick experiences the simulation as extremely inadequate, whereas Jerry experiences it as the best day of his life. I have to say, with watching and rewatching, this is where a lot of the humor of this episode lies. And Rick manages to freeze the simulation by overtaxing the processing power. This was the hip hop concert where they were going to reveal the secrets of concentrated dark. Generally, when I give a PowerPoint, I simply make these observations, but since this is not given as a lecture and you have to wait a while to ask questions, I've decided to include my observations also in short comments, observations. The first one is the use of simulated environments being taken for what we call reality occurs regularly in the series. As a setting, that is, a digital simulated environment, it is a recurrent novum in the narratives of the series, to borrow Darko Suvin's terminology. Rick's awareness is such that he readily recognizes the difference between reality of his many multiverses and a simulated reality. Throughout the entire episode, Morty is a simulated agent, but then the episode seems to end, and there is a little addendum at the end, and that's the real Morty trying to process his father's drunken strangeness. And I would say the series really says more about the awarenesses and expectations of its audience than making any clear statement criticizing a policy of ideology, except in general terms. Nonetheless, there may be some satirical targets. Jerry's extreme satisfaction living in the simulation being one. And actually, when the simulation was not working at all, when it was frozen, happened to correspond when Jerry was making love with his wife, Beth, and he characterized it as, well, I won't quote him, but at any rate, he was extremely satisfied. And that is part of the humor, obviously. Likewise, Jerry characterized it as the most meaningful day of his life. He finally feels complete, and here is a guy who basically feels complete in a low CPU processing simulation. It also makes fun of advertising campaigns, as in the Got Apples, as a play on, oh, I beg your pardon, Hungry for Apples, as a play for the Got Milk advertisement. If you're outside of North American society, you might not get that. There is some playing at the element of prudery. For instance, the aliens can't look at the private parts of people, so Rick has to strip his grandson and himself so they won't be spied upon. There could be a dig at corporate culture, and this is not just the advertising culture, but also the culture of the aliens on board the spaceship at the very end, when the guy, before he tries to make the concentrated dark matter that completely destroys the spacecraft, he says, "Oh, I want to really thank my team. I love you. I love your family." That's the kind of thing you get in a successful software firm, I would say. Um, and also, anyone not as wise or world weary or jaded or nihilistic as Rick is made fun of as well. The ABCs of Beth debuted on the 27th of October 2017, actually very close to the end of the third season, and the character Beth is developed further in the next season because she thinks she might be a clone. I'll get to that along with a discussion of the plot. The title is an allusion to a horror comedy called The ABCs of Death. Again, Roiland and Armin are quite fond of horror films, and it all occurs against the backdrop of a pending execution of a person named Tommy's father. Um, Beth's conscience compels her to return to where she marooned him as a child, a virtual playpen for his daughter created by Rick Sanchez when she was a child called, I wrote Frumpyland, but I think it might be Froopyland. Through some peculiar combination, Tommy manages to procreate with the artificial data-generated creatures and eats them in order to survive. To prevent the execution of Tommy's father, Beth goes back into Frumpyland or Froopyland to try to retrieve Tommy, but kills everybody and really only manages to bring back a tiny bit of his finger. And Rick clones it to produce Tommy and thereby preventing the execution. And in the wind down, Beth agrees to be cloned so that one of her can go out and explore the universe like her father, like her father, and the other can stay at home with Jerry and the kids. And in the wind down, Rick also espouses his peculiar nihilistic worldview. Likewise, I'd like to share some observations of this episode with you. Cloning in general and the cloning of Beth becomes a major plot character element, which is now part of the show's repertoire. And in season 4, Beth and Beth's clone not only meet, but they fight on the same side. Cyborg monsters generated by human machine intercourse also appears more than once in this series. But lest you think that that's a bit too creepy, this is the major thing that occurred. You know, it was like the big reveal in the Blade Runner sequel, Blade Runner 2049, a film which you either love or hate. I'm actually in the love camp myself. This episode is one of the clearest articulation of Sanchez's nihilistic worldview. In a godless world of multiple universes, nothing matters. And that nothing matters, that's starting to that was a vital part of the transhumanism conversion, I would say. Smart people know this, yet the humor of the series is largely based upon Rick's own human foibles, especially his pride in himself and his disdain in others. Possible satirical targets. Rick's parenting. Also, the use of electronic devices as a babysitter. This was something that was made fun of in the Simpsons series. And perhaps something about the ennui, the boredom of middle-aged married life. I would like to close this brief talk and the PowerPoint presentation with a quotation from the book Sapiens. I don't believe I made much out of this when we went through it, but nonetheless, it bears another looking at. Uh, Monotheism, Harari writes, explains order, but is mystified by evil. Dualism explains evil, but is puzzled by order. There is, says Harari, only one logical way of solving the riddle: to argue that there is a single omnipotent God who created the entire universe, and he's evil. But nobody in history has had the stomach for such a belief. I wonder if we're ready. Okay, I thank you for your kind attention. That concludes this brief PowerPoint presentation on 2 episodes of Rick and Morty.